Okay.
So you've come back for more. Well, I've dressed up for this part because it's going to get a bit wet and stormy in there, I think. Anyway, let's find out where we were. Mouser and Tom were just going out in their boat, weren't they? They'd left the light on in the house. There we are. Okay. Soon their little boat was crossing the harbour towards the Mousehole Gap, and the voice of the great storm cat rose all around them like a giant caterwauling. As she listened to him wailing, Mouser felt a sudden strange sadness for him. How lonely he must be, she thought, endlessly hunting the mice men in the deeps of darkness, and never returning to the rosy glow of a red-hot range. And her kind heart was moved to comfort him. Many a tomcat had Mouser tamed in a time with the sweetness of her singing. Now she lifted her head and sang like a siren, joining her call with the cry of the great storm cat. And so it was that he was taken so off guard as the little boat made its bid for freedom. Soothed by the sweetness of Mouser's serenade, the great storm cat paused in his prowling and pulled back his giant cat's paw for a mere moment. Swiftly the little boat passed through the mouse hole and out into the open sea. Then the great storm cat played with them as a cat plays with a mouse. He would let them loose for a little as they fought their way towards the fishing grounds. Then down would come his giant cat's paw in a flurry of foam and water. But it did not yet strike to sink them, for that would have spoiled his sport. When they reached the fishing grounds, the sea was so rough that it was hard to put out the nets. "I fancy you must sing again, Mouser, my handsome," said Tom, "for your voice seems to soothe the sea like the sirens of old." So Mouser sang again, longer and louder than she had ever sung before. Indeed, old Tom was forced to block up his ears so that her siren song should not distract him from the business of fishing. And again the great storm cat paused in his play and sang with her until the nets were safely shot. All day they fished in a seething sea. The waves were so high and the clouds so low that they soon lost sight of the shore. And all the time the great storm cat played with the little boat, striking it and then losing it, but never quite sinking it. And whenever his claws grew too sharp, Mouser would sing to him and soften the edge of his anger. As evening came down, they hauled in the nets. Into the belly of the boat tumbled ling and launces, scad, hake and fairmaids. Enough fish for a whole cauldron of morgy broth, enough pilchards for 100 stargazy pies. "Mouser, my handsome, we are all saved," said old Tom, "if we can but bring this hole home to harbour." But Mouser knew that the great storm cat would strike when he saw them run for the shelter of the mouse hole. She knew that the game serves only to sharpen the appetite for the feast to follow. It is his meal or mine, thought Mouser, as she looked at the floundering fish in the belly of the boat. Blue, green and silver, they glistened in the greyness, and it made her mouth water just to look at them. As she thought of the morgy broth murmuring on top of the range, the stargazy pie growing golden in the oven, Mouser began to purr, and her purring rose like a hymn to home above the noise of the great storm cat's howling. Such music had not reached the ears of the great storm cat since the dawn of time, for when do cats purr out in the wind and the darkness? Puzzled, he paused in his howling, bending his ear to catch the strange sound. It seemed to him that he had once heard such a song long before, when he was no more than a storm kitten. The great storm cat grew quiet. Gone was his hunger for the hunting, for making his meal of the mice men. Only the pleasure of the purring remained. Then the great storm cat began to purr with Mouser, and as the soft sound grew, the winds waned and the waves weakened. Night fell, and the little boat sailed back across a slackening sea. As they came in sight of home, a strange sight met their eyes. The whole village of Mousehole was shining with light and lanterns gleaming along both arms of the harbour. For when the people of Mousehole had woken to find old Tom's boat missing and a light left in his window, they knew that he had gone out to find fish for them, or to perish in the deep water. All day they had watched and waited, staring out into the cloud-racked sea, but they could see no sign of him. And when night fell, the woman went home and set candles in all their windows, and every man lit a lantern and went down to the harbour walls. As they waited and watched, they saw that the wind was dying and that the sea was growing calm. The dark clouds lifted and a thin moon shone out between them, and in the light of the thin moon they saw a small boat coming, and behind it came the smallest, tamest storm kitten of a wind. As old Tom and Mouser came through the Mousehole Gap, a sudden breeze caught them, a tiny, playful cat's paw, like a gesture of farewell. There was a great deal of cooking in Mousehole that night. The people made a whole cauldron of morgie broth. They baked hake, cooked kedgeree, grilled fairmaids, fried launces, souscad. They baked 100 stargazy pies. Then people and cats, they feasted together until the hunger was no more than a memory. And every year since that day, at the inn on the quayside, the people of Mousehole hold a fish feast on the night before Christmas Eve, and raise their glasses to the memory of old Tom. And every year, in the yard at the back of the inn, the cats of Mousehole gather and raise a great howling to the memory of old Mouser. And every year, folk come from all over Cornwall at Christmas time to see Mousehole lit up with 1,000 lights, shining their message of hope and a safe haven to all those who pass in peril of the sea. Here's to old Tom.